Istanbul, Constantinople as the Ottomans called it. May 20th, 1622. A door opens in the darkness. Not a palace door. It's the iron, rusty gate of Yedikule Fortress, the place where the Ottoman Empire sent those it decided to forget. The boy inside had been the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire 3 days earlier, commander of 100,000 soldiers, ruler of 3 continents. Tonight, 10 men came to take him. They expected a prisoner. Before the night was over, he would kill 3 of those 10. 18 years, without a sword, without an empire. What kind of man spills the blood of his killers? To understand why the soldiers came to him in the dark, you must understand what he was trying to do. His name was Osman, the second sultan to bear that name. History would call him Genç Osman, the young Osman, and that name would embody everything: youth, ambition, and misjudgment. He ascended the throne in 1618, at the age of 14, the son of the Ottoman Sultan Ahmed I, who built the Blue Mosque. You were standing in the Ottoman court in 1618. The marble corridors smell of rose water. The ceilings are tiled with intricate designs that took decades of skilled craftsmen to complete. And beneath all this, beneath the ceremonies, the silks, and the gilded lanterns, something is rotting. The Janissaries. They began as the most sophisticated military innovation in the world during the medieval period. Boys from Christian families across the Balkans were taken, threatened, and trained from infancy in one art: warfare. They were not mercenaries, they were weapons, made to serve one master, the Sultan. For 220 years, this system worked. But by the 17th century, they were paid without fighting. They owned businesses. They met in Istanbul's coffee houses and spoke openly about which sultan served their interests and which had become a burden. They had overthrown one sultan, quietly, unanimously. 10,000 men had decided together that the throne needed another occupant. They had learned a lesson they would never forget. Sultans could be deposed. Osman understood this. So he studied military history with the intensity of a man preparing for an exam that could cost him his life if he failed. He practiced archery before dawn and wrote disciplined poetry about duty and empire. He was 14 years old, and he was already planning. In September 1621, Osman made his first public mistake. He took his army north to a fortress called Khotin, on the border of what is now Ukraine, held by a combined Polish-Lithuanian and Cossack force roughly 1/3 his size. The math was straightforward. The Janissaries made it complicated. They did not refuse openly. They did not draw swords and shout. They slowed. At moments requiring momentum, they held back. At critical junctures, they arrived late. The Cossack defenders, commanded by a general named Petro Sahaydachny, a man fighting with a fraction of Osman's numbers, absorbed attack after attack, bled and held. 26 days. The siege ran for 26 days. At the end of it, Osman signed a peace agreement that gave him almost nothing. He mounted his horse and rode back toward Istanbul in silence. He was 17. He had gone to war to demonstrate Ottoman dominance. He was returning, having demonstrated the opposite. Multiple Ottoman chronicles record, though historians debate the exact source, that Osman stated publicly, in front of senior commanders, that the Janissaries had failed their sultan on the field. He did not say this quietly. He said it where the men he was describing could hear it. They heard him. In the winter of 1621, Osman began to move. He announced his intention to travel to Mecca for the Hajj, a devout act, beyond public criticism, beyond political challenge. A sultan going to pray is a sultan no one can openly oppose. But the records suggest the Hajj was a cover. His real destination was Anatolia. His real purpose, recruit a new army. Drawn from Muslim populations of Anatolia, loyal to the Sultan alone, existing entirely outside the Janissary system, a force that had never learned that sultans could be unmade. He closed the coffee houses. One by one, the doors were locked and the fires went cold. He reduced Janissary salaries, quietly, without announcement. He appointed administrators who answered to him, not to the core. Each step was careful. Each step was defensible in isolation. But the Janissaries were not reading each step in isolation. They were reading the pattern. A former Grand Vizier named Kara Davud Pasha, a man with specific grievances against the young Sultan, grievances the Ottoman chronicles hint at but never detail explicitly, began making contact. Quietly, in the spaces between official correspondence, in the language of men who have decided that waiting is no longer the safer option. He was not the only one listening, but he was the one who picked up the weapon first. The question history has never fully answered: did he act alone? Osman had two choices: retreat from his reforms and survive, or press forward and risk everything. He chose to press forward, and that decision would bring 10 men to his door. Before we continue, if this story is pulling you in, subscribing helps us keep bringing you narratives like this. 1 second, that is all it costs. Now, back to Osman. May 18th, 1622, the 26th of Ramadan, 1031 by the Hijri calendar. Morning. The city woke to the sound of drums, not war drums, assembly drums. The Janissaries and the Sipahi cavalry were gathering at the Süleymaniye Mosque, the largest in Istanbul, built by Süleyman the Magnificent, the Kanuni, who had given the law of the empire its shape. A gathering at the Süleymaniye was not a casual thing, it was a declaration. They drafted a petition, a list of demands addressed to the Sultan. The language was formal: unpaid wages, disrespected traditions, appointments made without consultation. The meaning underneath it was not formal at all. Osman received the petition. He read it. He sent it back. His response, as recorded in contemporary Ottoman accounts, was direct. He would not negotiate with soldiers about the exercise of his authority. A sultan who answered to his army was not a sultan. But the refusal was the signal the Janissaries had been waiting for. By noon, they moved. Not toward the palace gates, not yet. First to Dilaver Pasha, the Grand Vizier, the man closest to Osman's reforms. They found him. He did not survive the encounter. His body was left in the street. Then to Süleyman Aga, the Aga of the Black Eunuchs, the man who ran the intelligence network inside the palace. Same outcome. The two men who could have warned Osman and organized a response were gone before the afternoon call to prayer. By evening, the Janissaries had forced the ulema, the religious scholars of Istanbul, to convene an emergency session. The Sheikhul Islam, Esad Effendi, was brought forward. He issued a fatwa, one sentence, a religious legal ruling. Osman II was no longer sultan. You are standing outside the palace that night. The city is quiet in the way that cities go quiet when something irreversible has happened. The lights are still burning in the minarets. The call to prayer will come at dawn, as it always does. But something has shifted in the air, something that smells like stone in the absence of options. May 19th, dawn. Mustafa I, Osman's uncle, confined to a room in the palace for 14 years on grounds of mental instability, was brought out into the light. He was 36 years old. He blinked at the sun like a man who had forgotten it existed. They placed the imperial turban on his head. They told him he was sultan. Osman was found in his private apartments. The sword at his side was taken. The turban on his head was removed. He was placed on a horse, not a sultan's horse, a stable horse, and led through the streets of Istanbul. The accounts describe what followed without embellishment, because the facts require none. Crowds gathered. People shouted. Some threw things. The ruler of 3 continents was paraded through his own capital. May 20th, midday. Davud Pasha received his authorization. He was appointed Grand Vizier in the name of the new Sultan. The man who wanted Osman dead now held the authority to make it lawful. Osman was transferred to Yedikule, the fortress of 7 towers. Byzantine-era stone beneath Ottoman additions, damp earth, iron, underground. That evening, Davud Pasha arrived with 10 men. What happened next is recorded in several Ottoman chronicles. The details vary, but all accounts agree on one thing. Osman did not cooperate. He fought, in a cell, no weapons, against 10 trained soldiers. The 18-year-old former sultan injured at least 3 of his killers before they brought him down. A rope was placed around his neck, and then, in what the chronicles describe with clinical brevity, he was killed. Afterward, his ear was cut from his body. It was sent across the city to Halim Sultan, Mustafa's mother, the woman who had spent 14 years watching her son held captive while Osman's father, and then Osman himself, held power over his life. She received the ear. The chronicles note, and this detail appears in more than one account, that she relaxed. The city absorbed it quietly. Not because it didn't matter, because it mattered too much to say out loud. Osman II was the first Ottoman Sultan in the dynasty's 300-year history to be killed by his own soldiers. Every sultan before him had died in battle, in bed, or by the hands of rivals inside the palace. None had been pulled from a throne, paraded through the streets, and murdered in a prison cell by the men sworn to protect him. The Janissaries issued their official account almost immediately. Davud Pasha had acted alone. The corps had not ordered the killing. The corps had not participated. The corps had been appalled. The chronicles do not support this, but the chronicles were written by people who understood the difference between truth and survival. Osman's body was carried from Yedikule. By several accounts, his face had been damaged, the ear already taken. He was buried in the mausoleum attached to the Sultan Ahmed Mosque, the Blue Mosque, the building his father had spent years and a fortune constructing. There was no royal funeral procession. Mustafa I took the throne for the second time. He lasted 13 months. He couldn't govern in 1617. He couldn't govern in 1622. The same forces that placed him there, because he was useful, pliable, unlikely to develop plans of his own, removed him again in 1623. Therefore, the question of succession fell to the next available prince. He was 11 years old. His name was Murad. He became Murad IV. No one was afraid of a child. That was their second mistake. Davud Pasha lived exactly 1 year after Osman's death. In 1623, the Regency government, operating in the name of the child sultan, issued his execution order. He was taken to Yedikule fortress, the same building, the same stone walls. He was strangled. His body was displayed at the gate. The hidden winner, the figure who gained most and was never charged, was Halime Sultan. She watched her son on the throne. She died protected by the walls of the harem and the silence it provided. Her name lives in the margins of the chronicles, never centered, never tried. But here is what the records show and rarely emphasize. The Janissaries who killed Osman were never disbanded. They continued. They operated inside the empire for another 204 years. They deposed more sultans. They killed others. What they did to Osman was not an aberration. It was a precedent. We are back at the door. Yedikule, May 20th, 1622. Iron, stone, dark. You are standing outside that cell again. The question from the beginning of this story was never really about how he died. It was about why, at 18, with no weapons, no guards, no empire left, he still fought. History offers 3 answers, and they do not fully agree. The first, recorded in Ottoman court chronicles written closest to the event, is institutional. Osman misjudged the speed of his own reforms. He moved against a structure older, more deeply embedded, and more ruthless than he understood. His killing was the system defending itself. This interpretation treats the Janissaries as rational actors responding to an existential threat. The second is personal. Kara Davud Pasha had a private grievance. Without his specific ambition, the Janissaries might have deposed Osman and left him alive. The death was not the plan, it was the revenge. The third lives in the silence around Halime Sultan. In the ear delivered across the city, in the coordination that ran too smoothly for improvisation. Several Ottoman chronicles place her influence at the edges of the conspiracy, never at the center, never explicitly named. She was never tried. No investigation was opened. Davud Pasha was executed, but for overstepping, not for the killing itself. European diplomatic dispatches from the period note the event without adding new detail. What survives is what the survivors chose to preserve. 204 years later, a sultan named Mahmud II surrounded the Janissary barracks with artillery. He disbanded them in a single afternoon. He called it the auspicious incident. Osman II had tried to do the same thing. He was 18. The door is still there.